Would you like to be somebody who understands the benefit of God's death? Then listen to this entire video where I explain what occurred with Christianity in the recent centuries, what implications it had for society, and the opportunity that lies in our hands now to actually transform or actually take advantage of God's death to consciously integrate religious stories and their psychological value. Okay, so before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Let's get into it. Now, the scientific revolution occurred, I would say, a few centuries ago when Western societies started to value truth above everything else, and because Christianity entailed dogmatic axioms, so statements that were not really based on any scientific evidence, Christianity collapsed essentially and its prominence declined, whilst the value of science and truth increased. So that's why science today is the sort of, dominant belief system, and Christianity or other religions have fallen into science's shadow, let's say. So there has been a decline in the religious presence, a decline of the religious presence in the lives of Western individuals. This brings an absence of spirituality and also meaning to a degree, because God gave humans meaning, hope, and guided them towards a good life, which is also like a synonym for the reduction of suffering, I would say. And Christianity spoke to the biological needs of humans, which teaching is absent now. Nothing is really engaging in these biological needs of humans anymore, but the needs remain, as obviously, and because we're still alive, and now they are urging to be fulfilled, and this urge creates suffering because there is no prominent channel of teaching which delivers value to the, let's say, spiritual or the need for meaning in humans' life, let's say, which Christianity or religion used to fulfill. Now, Nietzsche claimed that God was dead. I think he wrote this towards the end of the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken, and Nietzsche said God had been killed by humans, and because the value or the belief in Christianity had declined and God was no longer relevant, let's say. So he had been killed. And Nietzsche predicted that the 20th century would experience a colossal amount of bloodshed as a result of God's absence. Because God no longer gave humans a home in this world, like a figurative home, so humans went to look for a new home that would protect them from the harshness of the universe and life itself. Because, life is quite challenging and entails a lot of sort of inherent suffering and tragedy. And if you don't have a structure in life or a belief system that gives you hope and something to live for, well, you suffer even more. And Carl Jung said, humans cannot live a life without meaning. And that's what it is. I think humans need something to believe in, let's say. And that was taken away from them, or they let it. The consequence of it being taken away from them was a consequence of their own behavior, let's say. So humans went to look for a new home, and they found fascism and communism, and the result of that was genocidal. The results were genocidal. So, of course, this is exemplified by the tragedies of Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and the communist regime in China under Mao's reign, and also countries like Cambodia, that's how you say it in German, I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. So at first it seems like God's death is all bad, but it's not in my eyes. Now here's the silver lining. Because God is dead, or died, there is now an opportunity to consciously integrate God and religion with a scientific perspective without it being shoved down your throat, without it being imposed on you. Now, beforehand, children, I would say, or families, the children of like religious families, which most people were back then, were forced to believing in God without having the space or opportunity to evaluate Christianity and God by themselves. And they couldn't evaluate what religion really had to offer, what it was based on, or why it was taught, or why it was created. And like the logical argument for religion and how it brings value in life was not delivered. But religion has a logical argument in my eyes, and how it brings value in life was not taught. But Christianity and the values it is based on has survived. Christianity and the stories, these ancient stories, have survived for thousands of years, not by accident. They have survived because it was so valuable, and the value created was so important to humans that they needed to sustain and keep it alive, whilst monumental empires collapsed and buildings withered as time proceeded. The stories of Christianity have survived, and that says a lot. It was so valuable, people just had to keep it alive, and maybe they didn't even try, but it was just so potent that it stayed alive autonomously. Now, I think this gives an opportunity to us to consciously integrate it voluntarily by ourselves, what religion has to offer, the value it has, the psychological implications, which we didn't have the opportunity to do before. And I can tell you from my own experience, that is what has happened myself. Like, I like to take a scientific perspective. If there's not really evidence for something, or if I don't feel like it might be true, I'm very skeptical of something. I don't disregard it, but I'm skeptical. So I'll only really believe something fully if I know that it's right. And I'm slowly discovering the utility of religion and what God means. Like, I see God as it's a structure that governs the universe, and it's a structure with kind of rules, and if you follow these rules, if you act in certain ways, you benefit from life, like you get rewarded somehow. But if you go against it, you get punished and you suffer additionally somehow. And I'm thinking, well, what is this thing that is like objectively determining the outcome for people's lives and judging people's behavior? And that is God, I think. I didn't really look it up, but I felt like this must be what what people have been talking about when they use the term God. And I voluntarily explored life and the utility of religion in life, and I think it could develop humans into a high level of being effective and efficient and strong and emotionally, psychologically stable in life. Like, there's real utility in it. It seems like scientific. Like, if we can follow these teachings, we can set up a hypothesis, we can test it and see if it's statistically significant, if the results are statistically significant. But people would not have been able to think this way because they didn't evaluate it and scrutinize the teachings and try and figure out why we being taught this. Yeah. And to connect to the story, the obvious question of do you believe in God is a difficult one, and I look up to people like Dr. Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung, and they both have a very interesting answer to the question, do you believe in God? And I think this ties in very nicely. Jordan Peterson says, I behave as if God exists. Now, this is very interesting because the word believe, like I believe in God, is it's comparatively quite weak. Like, the verb believe in regards to God, like believing in God, is it's weak in that you could find a stronger connection to how you deal or handle God. Like, believing is like this almost naiveness. It exemplifies this like naivety. Whereas behaving as if God exists is like you are actively following the teachings of religion as if they are true, and you are like consciously trying to behave in a way that would benefit you, in a way, or would benefit you because it is parallel to this structure of God, let's say, this universal structure, objective law or truth of God. And Carl Jung also has a very interesting answer. He said, when somebody asked him, do you believe in God? There's a video on YouTube, you can watch it. And he says, first of all, he says, that's a complex question. But then he says, I know God exists. And this is also a very interesting answer, because Carl Jung explains then that the concept of God is a very subjective experience, and you find it by yourself, by evaluating, processing religion and the concept of God, and really consciously trying to deconstruct its utility and why it would be true according to your perception. And yes, and I think that's very useful, because it shows that the subjectivity of God means that you won't understand the real value of God if the concept of it is imposed on you and you are forced to believe it. Because believing is just like, you can say you believe in God, but that by no means guarantees that you actually behave accordingly. So I think the question, do you believe in God, is quite suboptimal. One should, or you can use it, but be careful how you answer that question. So I think this is an opportunity to consciously revive God, evaluate religion through a scientific lens, and deconstruct how it is like objectively useful to us, and how we can nurture maybe the subjective experience of it and find value in that. And a God that died has now potentially been reborn, or we can rebirth God, and that's a death and rebirth story, which is transformation. And when something dies and is reborn, it usually is reborn in a stronger form. So I think this is really an opportunity for us to individually evaluate God and religion and extract its utility and integrate it into our psyche, into our consciousness, and really benefit from it instead of disregarding it and throwing it out of the window. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Thank you for listening.